This Z-Files on the Road is in the Bracken Building in downtown Crestview, not too far from where the new courthouse will be opening up this year. And we're here with one of our county commissioners, Mr. Kelly Wines, and this means I've gotten all 5 of the commissioners in an interview here in this first part of 2018. And of course, they'll be celebrating the 100th anniversary of the first courthouse when you move into this new one. Have you had a chance to, by the way, tour this new building?
Well, Cal, I have not been inside it, but I've been around it at all angles, watching the progress, and I've been in touch with the Public Works Director and the builder and talking to them, and it's going well. And other than being maybe a little over on time, I think the budget's in order, and it's going to be something we can all be real proud of.
And as we've pointed out in the Z-Files here a couple of weeks ago with J.D. Peacock, we went through the minutes. Book number 1 was all handwritten, and book number 2, they went to typewritten pages. But we've determined that the first meeting where they said in their office in the courthouse was December 10th, 1918. And the month before, they had a meeting, a special meeting on the last Saturday of November, and as had all the other minutes from the beginning in 2015 and October 15 in their office at, first 2 years it was Milligan, then Crestview, but then they finally said in the courthouse, so we figured that's got to be they were probably in it and getting office fixtures in before that date, but that's when they had their first meeting there. So it'll be exciting to hold your meetings in this new building up here.
Well, absolutely. It's a long time in coming, and quite some time overdue for the new building. A facelift on this one was not in order. It was time to start over.
Now, when you went into courtroom B, as I did with the judge one day on a tour of it, and when you opened the door, you thought you'd walked into a locker room, and a couple of weeks ago's football stuff was still on the floor. Kind of like walking in a room of some bad fish bait.
Oh, I don't know about that analogy. That wouldn't be very good. But it's coming along good. It's very necessary. I think it's going to be an uptick for Main Street and Crestview and all of Okaloosa County, actually. So it'll make us all proud.
Well, Kelly Wine, let's get back to talking about you. And I mentioned just fishing. I gather fishing has been your career since you probably could hold a rod and reel in your hand.
Yeah, I grew up in the business. My grandfather was a fisherman. My father and my uncle were both fishermen, and so I came by it naturally and just loved it from day one. I was pretty fortunate. I knew when I was 15 years old what I was going to do for a living, so that gives you a little advantage on the competition, and it's worked out okay for me.
I gather you've still got a fleet of boats, but I think you said your son and some other family guys are keeping it going?
Yes, sir. My wife and I, we have interest now in 5 boats still, and my son's running my boat, the Sunrise. He's renamed it the Out of Line, which is pretty appropriate for that kid. But I'm real proud of him. He's doing well, and so he's 4th generation Destin Fisherman. And he's got a grandson that I'm just about ready to start teaching how to hold a pole.
The history of the Destin fishing fleet and fishing down there, of course, goes back to some basic families that were down there. And then a group of your families that all grew up. I guess there's some history you can tell me about those early years.
Well, my Uncle Irby was more of a fisherman than my father. My father was part-time fisherman, but back then it was a lot of commercial fishing and some party fishing. Now it's changed around where it's almost all charter or party fishing. We got party boats and charter boats, and it's each has its advantage. On a party boat, you can buy a ticket for a real nominal price. Take your son fishing for $120 or so for 6 hours, and it makes for a good time, and you get enough for supper, and it's a good outing. Charter fishing is a little more exclusive. You get better service, better, faster boats. Just a little. It's a step up and more personal attention. So it all works, and to each his own in that respect. But yeah, my family is. The tradition of fishing is deep and goes way back there, and hope it continues on.
And of course, I can remember, as I told you, my first trip was in 1958. I was working at the WALB Radio TV in Albany, Georgia, as you appropriately say if you're up there. And one day somebody from one of the staff said, "We're going to go down to Destin. You want to go fishing with us?" And it was a long ride from Albany to Dothan and then down. I think we went down 331. and I'm sure it was all two-lane back then, and to get to 98 and then come into Destin from that direction, because there was no Mid-Bay Bridge, and I had never been in Fort Walton and had never heard of a Crestview back in that time. It was just that little fishing place, and I don't think there were any tall buildings on the beach at that time.
No, and I remember way back in those days where you could buy Gulf Front real estate for real cheap, and a lot of the old timers would laugh at you when they heard about offerings or a price of land for sale and say, "Heck, you can't grow anything on that beach." And they're growing quite a bit now down there, though.
Well, there was this guy that I think he started out doing turpentine and timber work down there, and eventually had some fishing boats. And I know one night sitting in a restaurant or in the lounge down there back on one of those 58 trips, and he was trying to sell us some land over on the bay side for $10 a foot along the bay. I think that Mr. Kelly did okay, though, after that.
Yes, he did. I knew Coleman Kelly. As a kid, we used to go on his property and cut firewood and get fatwood, lighter knots as they call them. Yeah. And we've been severely reprimanded on our beach buggies for getting in there in his woods and helping ourselves. But I remember those days. He was always fair, and he was, but he let us know who was in charge. Yeah.
Who would have ever dreamed of what would have happened in all that is there now in what is Destin as a tourist attraction and as a place. And you still have some good hometown folks that still live there.
Oh yeah, there's still lots of people that grew up there. I mean, not as many as natives as there used to be. Of course, it's such a vacation destination and such a retirement area that a lot of people moved in from elsewhere. But we still got some of the old families represented out there.
Right. When did you get an interest in being involved in politics?
Well, in '06, I looked at the Destin City Council, and I didn't think the fishermen were getting as fair a shake and as much recognition as they deserved, and there was a little bit too much military on there for me. So I thought, why can't a local fisherman get on there and bring a little bit of common sense? And so I tried to do that, and hopefully was successful to some extent. And then after 4 years on the city council, I looked at the representation for the county and thought, why can't a local fisherman serve on the county as well and represent the South End? And was fortunate enough to get elected, and then to a second term.
Oh, good. And of course, you've got one of the fishermen now running for mayor down there.
Right, Gary Jarvis is running for mayor. He's been there a long time and has done well in the fishing business. He's a good businessman. He's also in several restaurants. His boys are. He's a partner with them, I believe. So he'll have a good look at bring a good perspective to the city council as far as business and the fishing industry and the history of Destin.
And that whole harbor area has just so developed. I remember back in the 80s meeting Peter Boss and hearing of some of his dreams, and he, among others, have really been part of the contributors to what is now referred to as the boardwalk area and that whole section along the harbor.
Well, it was a group of property owners that stood together for that boardwalk, brought together by a good leader at the city council at the time, who's now with the county, Mr. Casella. He had a lot to do with it. Of course, Mr. Boss's property is on the extreme west end of the harbor, but the boardwalk goes way back into the Old Pass Lagoon, back east. So yeah, he might have had a part of it, but for the most part, it's the group of property owners that took a chance and signed easements with the city and allowed that boardwalk, and it's worked pretty well.
And of course, as I read in the history, some governor came along on a short trip out offshore. Of course, you don't have to go very far off the beach to catch pretty good fish because of the fact. And I remember attending a council meeting in Destin back maybe 15, 16 years ago, and a geologist was explaining in the theory why the sand is so white, because it goes deep so fast that the seashells don't roll and break up and make all those little pieces of brown stuff in that white quartz sand.
Well, I can speak to Governor Leroy Collins coming fishing with Captain Red Brunson, whose nickname was Salty, back in the day. The governor caught I think about a 30-pound king mackerel, just when he put his line in the water by the sea buoy, which he'd only been on the boat 15, 20 minutes. So that's where Destin got the name of the luckiest fishing village. And I wouldn't even pretend to attempt to be an expert on that sand right now.
Okay. But it is unique that you do have this, and I know I've got a friend that works in maintenance in one of the condo groups down there, and he's got a kayak, and he can just be out there with it and still looking at the workplace and catching fish right offshore, nice ones too.
Well, that's the beauty of Destin. You're close to deep water. Got a big variety of fishing from the bays on out to the deep water canyon for marlin, and we got quite a variety, and of course our reputation speaks to that.
Well, one of the projects that the county has got on the Triumph group of applications caught my attention, and that is these large buoy fish attractor things out into the deeper water. Have you had any input or any involvement in that application?
Yeah, I've had a little something to do with that. The theory is that they're called FADs, fish attracting devices, which out in the open water, when the loop current is close enough to Destin, the pelagic fish, the marlin, the sailfish, the dolphin, the wahoos, the tunas, blackfin and yellowfin, get in there, and all they need is, I call it a fish condo. Like, for instance, down west off Mobile, south of Mobile and west of there, you've got literally thousands of oil rigs, lots of them in the super deep water, and that's where they catch the yellowfin tunas. And billfish, of course, blue marlin. But we don't have anything to hold them up in our deep water. So these FADs are patterned after very successful operations in Hawaii and Puerto Rico and around the world. It just hadn't been done in the Gulf. And we started this project about 6 years ago with our then state senator. And so it's just been baby steps along. There's, you know, the old saying about the wheels of government turn slowly. You've got to have a lot of clearances, National Marine Fisheries, Coast Guard, it goes on and on and on. And we're almost to the point where the Army Corps can issue us a permit, and the TDC, the various TDCs along the coast are going to chip in, because these FADs will be accessible all the way from Apalachicola to Orange Beach. And it'll be good fishing. It'll be good, a good pattern to run these 8 buoys on a day's fishing, and I think it's going to really be a successful thing. And it'll, in one respect, it'll help the fishing relax a little pressure on the reef fish, which are overregulated in my view to some extent, and it'll get back to the sport fishing, which is really where the upper crust clientele likes to fish. And so it'll maybe take a little pressure off the reef fish and give us a little of our true offshore sport fishing back.
Right. Well, I remember doing a news story and interviews when they had the first tournament out of the Baytown Wharf, but that thing has grown to be quite a thing. And of course, you got to run pretty good bit of time to get out there to where those big fish are. So the tractor concept might make it where, hey, there's another, just like you say, run those buoys, trolling, you'd about to do some pretty good days.
Well, that's right. And plus, even the slower boats, those tournaments are more conducive to the fast yachts that run 30 knots and are trying to spend money rather than make it. This system of buoys will allow the slower charter fishing boats that are trying to make a living to have access to have reach to a good fishery on a 2-day trip for sure, and in some cases on a 1-day trip for the faster ones. So it's more designed to help the fishermen, the overall fishing industry.
Back in the 90s, I met a fellow who was from Destin, who captained some boats, and just happened that the developer who he captained for, his name was Buddy Marler, and he wound up down in near Johns Pass in Madeira Beach, and he had convinced the local captains that they could take a 1-day trip out to the loop current, and it's a long trip from St. Petersburg to the loop current areas usually in the Gulf, and they could then fish all day Saturday and then come back in on Sunday. So that has became the Offshore Loop Development Suncoast Anglers Loop Tournament, or the Old Salt Fishing Club out of Madeira Beach. And so he was apparently the guy that convinced them that, yeah, you could, even out of St. Petersburg, go out there and catch the big billfish.
Well, that's what gives Destin the greatest advantage on the Gulf Coast. We're closer to the deep water. The DeSoto Canyon is 65 miles. You know, the 100-fathom curve is 42 nautical miles. That's all reachable in one day with a 20-knot boat.
Yeah.
So gives us the edge up.
Well, we could probably talk fishing all the time, and I know you enjoy that. Do you get to do any fishing anymore with your county position now?
It seems like every time my son goes on a commercial snapper trip, which I love to do, I've got a meeting or a workshop or a trip. So I'm kind of in the process of fixing another work boat that we own and getting it ready to go fishing when I can go. So it's still in my blood. I'm going to do a little fishing. I don't ever want to fish 300 days a year like I did for all those years because it's kind of tough on you. But I do want to keep my hand and do a little snapper fishing in the future.
Right. Well, let's talk about Okaloosa County in particular. A lot of challenges. I kind of made a little side note at the end of the meeting today to realize that 4 men really did things that made what we have here happen when Teddy Roosevelt created the Choctawhatchee National Forest, and then his cousin Franklin Roosevelt gave it to the Department of Defense in 1940. And, of course, we know that became what now is the Eglin operation. And then, of course, it was a couple of guys who bought a lot of land way back when timberland was not worth a whole lot, I guess, and created Valparaiso. And then Mr. Plew built his little airstrip and gave some land to the Department of Defense for a gunnery range. And now we have all of this traffic we can blame on them, right?
Well, it's just called progress, you know. You mentioned Val P. I first got to know Val P. a little bit in 1967, I think it was. I went there the first year of Okaloosa Walton Junior College when Dr. McCracken was in charge of it. And it was a makeshift school for sure, yeah. But it really makes you proud to see what's come of it now.
Yeah. Well, actually, the vault for the Valparaiso State Bank, that door and that vault is there in the Heritage Museum, and so those are the buildings where, in that historic piece of land and building, is where the county started out.
Well, that's right. That's right. And we've made some good strides forward for sure.
Of course, traffic is the big topic. The Tourist Development Council that's bringing these people here, the airport and the job that Tracy and Mike, I think, are doing down there. You've got what the Legion Airlines is doing and the number of visitors, where this is one of the busiest airports in the Southeast.
Well, I think it's the fastest growing airport in the Southeast and surely one of the busiest. There is some legislation out there that might allow us to broaden our reach of these tourist development tax funds and be able to help a little with some of this infrastructure that the visitors are using and demanding. So I hope we can get a little relief on that and use some of this TDC money for things other than just advertising. In my view, we've got about enough people here. What we need is to get back to our quality of our visitors, step that up a little bit, and more advertise more to the affluent type and the ones that want to really spend money and have a good time and know how to do it without upsetting the apple cart.
Right. Yeah, because when Panama City Beach made their changes over there on no beer on the beach for this month of March, have been waiting to see whether Walton or Okaloosa was going to be getting some of that people or those kids coming this way.
Right. Well, our sheriff's department, I got to hand it to them. They've done a good job in getting the word out that they weren't going to have much tolerance in that area, and it's been milder here lately than it has been in the past. So I take my hat off to the sheriff and his crew. They're doing a good job with maintaining some safety on the beaches.
Right. And that's another area of expense to the county is for the tourist protection, and of course the safety part, the lifeguard, that part does come out of some TDC money. But is this session of the legislature going to be doing anything, because it's just about over, as far as lightening or making it possible to use those TDC dollars to do things like roads, bridges, and what we need? Because I guarantee you the folks that come down Highway 4 through Baker, Saturday's a busy stoplight out there at the Highway 90 and that Highway 4 traffic light.
Well, I've seen it on their agenda. I don't know if they'll get to it this session. I hope they do. There's some favorable talk going on about us getting a little relief, and we definitely need some help in that regard. The airport itself that we talked about has been growing. Traffic and the handling of this traffic now. The work around Crestview, you've got to get the traffic around Crestview or out of it.
because this town has grown now where it is up, into the upper 20,000s. But yet within 5 miles of our radio station, there are 44,000 people, and only 27,000 are in the city limits. So, and then within 10 miles from our radio tower out on North First Avenue, we're at about almost 60,000. So there's a lot of population up here, and there's a whole lot at the south end too to deal with.
Well, the north end, of course, is because they got real estate, they got room to grow, is growing the fastest. And the P.J. Adams cutoff, which Commissioner Boyles and the entire board and the Public Works Department have been working hard to get that project going, and we've had some headway. That's probably the most needed transportation need in Okaloosa County today as we speak. But, of course, we got lots of them in other areas as well.
I made a trip last week down to Panama City, and I purposely went down over the Mid-Bay Bridge and wanted to travel east on 98 because I wanted to check out for a friend of mine his radio signal coming from Panama City this way. And I noticed they're working on 98 again out there as they're getting to expand that part all the way to the Walton County line.
Right. It's a mess right now, but the duration of the project is such you can't pick a time of year to do it. It's a long-lived project, so they're doing the best they can with it. And there's been some problems, quite frankly, out there. But in the long run, when they get it done, hopefully it'll take a little pressure off that area right out there.
Right. What other projects do you have that you personally are trying to get accomplished within Okaloosa County?
Oh, my goodness. There's the Azalea Corridor in Destin, which is also known as a crosstown connector. I've been working with Senator Gaynor on that, and I hope we can get some favorable rulings on that out of the legislature. It's not that big a project. It's only a $5 or $6 million project, but that's a pretty good sized project for the city of Destin. And if we could get some help with that, it would get some more people on the back roads and take a little of that congestion off at 98, especially with the new work that's being done right now out there. So that's pretty high up on the priority. And it's just regulatory from the county there's always got to be ways to make it easier to get things permitted, take some of the red tape out of it. Been working with Elliot Campert on that, some electronic reporting stuff for permits, and the list goes on pretty deep on needs of the county. But as far as the biggest or the most, it's transportation.
Right. And in the area of transportation, there was talk a few years back, and I don't know where it's gone with the TPO or anybody, of eventually a bypass north of 98 coming basically north of Hurlbut, north of Niceville, picking up using part of that Mid-Bay Road maybe, and then going all the way over to 331 as a road that would take the travel cross-through traffic off. Is there any more talk about that at the TPO level or at the county level?
Not lately. I haven't heard much about it. That would be wonderful, because the bulk of the percentage of traffic that goes through downtown Destin is pass-through traffic. 65% or so is what I've heard. So if something like that was eventually to take place, that would do wonders for it.
And of course, since you are in Destin, the need for more parking for the locals and the tourists, whether it's parking lots or maybe in parking garages, maybe on the future.
Yeah, when I was on the council in 06, just to get back to the wheels of government turn ever so slowly, we talked about 3 parking garages, one east, one in the center, and one on the west end. And we do have one in the center of the town now. I think it's about 110 parking places, but the deficiency is well over 1,000 right now. So we got a ways to go. And of course, public-private partnerships have been entertained, but so far, I guess the numbers aren't big enough, or this profit margin's not great enough for a private firm that does that sort of thing to come in there and make a play. So we're still working on it, but we're not getting anywhere fast on the parking garages.
Right. And of course, that big ditch to the sand that, as I've read in the history book, some of the young men of Destin decided to dig a little ditch to let the rainwater out of the bay, and next thing we knew, there was a new way to get to the Gulf rather than a lot of people don't know about the old entrance to the harbor that was way down on the east end.
Right, that was where the old, we called the Roundhouse or the Holiday Inn was, down in that area. Riviera Beach between those two is where that was. And believe it or not, that was before my time.
Okay.
But the pass now is having lots of facelifts and uplifts. It's getting, as today's meeting, we confirmed that we're going to dredge the East Pass at Destin, put the spoil sand on the western Holiday Isle beaches, about 130,000 cubic yards, which will help. That's a severely eroded area right now with lots of commerce right there, lots of condominiums, lots of tourist traffic. So that's a good thing. And also Noriego Point is being stabilized. That's about a $10 million project funded by the state. And so we got things going on out there. The next couple of months, there's going to a lot happening with our pass out there.
Right. And I remember hearing that geologist make the comment that the natural flow is that the sand, when it goes away, does move to the west side and build somewhat of a deposit out there that they try to get from, plus what you've got to take out to keep the pass dredged.
Well, the inlet management plan right now says that you can put sand on the most critically eroded areas or beaches, which now is on the east side. Now, I believe if you had to pick one, right or left, kind of like voting on the commission, there's no gray vote. You got to say yes or no. Right. I think the current predominantly does drift the sand to the west. So if you go with that theory, the addition of that 130,000 or so yards of sand on the east side of the jetties in heavy weather, turbulent weather, it stirs up. It's going somewhere. It's going to keep going west. So that it helps immediately on Holiday Isle, but long term it also helps the beaches of Okaloosa Island.
Right. But it's just natural geology. It's going to move around with the winds that we get. At least we've been fortunate so far for the last quite a few years. We've not had a major storm come down and disrupt our beach area.
We always try not to say the H word, Cal,
okay,
but we have been most fortunate, and but that luck can't run forever, and we all know it.
Well, Commissioner Wines, we enjoyed your time. I know you're busy. You've got today's not going to be a good day to go fishing. It's all drizzly out there, so you're going to have to go back to the office or something.
Well, I've got some stuff in Shalimar to do, and I don't fish as much as I used to. I'm in more of a supervisory capacity now, but I'm still enjoying it, and it's been good to talk to you.
All right. Thank you much for your time, sir.
Yes, sir.